Today is the 7th day of the Ngok summer teachings. So I'd like to offer my warm greetings to the source of refuge, the monks and nuns in the Sangha, as well as all my Dharma friends, as well as my all of my Tibetan compatriots. I hope that you are all doing well. So next, I'd like to continue. Now, the other day, we were speaking about the Sangha after of the early Buddhist Sangha, and we were speaking about the difficulties that they encountered after the Buddhist Nirvana. Among these, one of these was the difficulties in terms of the Vinaya, and another was with regards to the true Dharma, shall we say. Whether we say the Dharma or the sutras, so you could say there were difficulties, or you could say that there are new situations or new issues. And what these were the first thing is that primarily speaking about the dharmas that were taught, the word teachings of the Buddha were determined during the first council. And the words of the Buddha that are the foundations of our listening, contemplating, and meditation, the teachings of the Buddha, or the words of the Buddha, were determined at the first council. However, later, over the course of time, there were some issues that needed to be addressed. There are three main problems that they encountered, and the first of these is that many of the Buddha's teachings were not included in the first council. Excuse me, that was not the first. Oh, there's no problem. I forgot to put the first one in. In any case, many of the Buddha's teachings were not compiled during the first council. There were many that were left over. And so it was important to add them all. Likewise, during the first council, there were some senior elders, shall we say, some great arhats, who were unable to attend the first council and participate. So the people who participated in the first council it was not complete. And so this was one problem that was there. Because not all of the arhat disciples of the Buddha were able to gather there. So for that reason, there were some scattered teachings. The teachings of the Buddha became a little bit scattered, and if they were not properly taken care of, then they might be quickly lost. And so it's urgently necessary to collect them and to organize them. So this is one issue or difficulty that they faced. That's the first section. Now the second is what I was showing before, is that a few of the great arhats had studied the Buddha's teachings in depth. For example, Shariputra, if you look at the way that he taught the Dharma, he was extremely very learned. And he was even praised by the Buddha. And the way some people explain it is that when the Buddha turned the Dharma, we call it turning the wheel of Dharma. But when other people, and when ordinary people speak, we don't call it turning the wheel of Dharma. But The teachings of Shariputra were often called turning the wheel of Dharma. In any case, the way that Shariputra taught and the taught that he Dharma was at a very high level. It's basically the same as the Buddha's teachings, and for that reason, the Dharma that Shariputra taught was labeled by the term turning the wheel of Dharma. And so for that reason, there were a few great disciples of the Buddha, like Shariputra, on a high level, who had studied the teachings and researched them in great depth and had a very profound understanding of them. So not only do the Buddha's teachings need to be compiled, but also the teachings of his disciples, the great arhats, also needed to be compiled and collected in a single collection. Now, the third is that a few bhikshus, when they taught the Dharma, they made some mistakes. They made some mistakes in the way that they taught the Dharma. So this did happen a few times. Now, some of these were extremely serious mistakes, and this did occur, and for this reason, because there were these serious mistakes, then what was required was that the entire Sangha once again gather to re-examine the Buddha's teachings and to take the Buddha's words as a basis and then see whether the teachings of the elders were correct or not. It's important to do that in order to eliminate any misunderstandings and misapprehensions. So you could say that these are difficulties, or you could say that there are three important issues that had to be faced. So I spoke about that a fair amount. The main thing that I'm speaking about today, though, is that the situation in the Sangha after the Buddha's parinirvana. This is basically saying, what is the historical environment that they were in? What was the situation and environment they were in historically? What was the political background? For example, there are the 16 great countries or kingdoms of India. So we gave a good bit of an introduction to that, right? And likewise, there's also the situation or the of the Buddhist Sangha within society, and likewise how the Buddhist Dharma spread. We've also given an introduction to that. And another area we've always discussed are what were the attitudes within the Sangha, and what were the disagreements in terms of view and conduct. So we've given an introduction to these as well. In any case, we've gone from the external to the inside, from the large scale to the small scale. We've already gone through this. But the Sangha of the Buddhist Sangha of that period continued to have the form of a unified community, to be a single Sangha community. Now, of course, internally there were some disagreements and disputes, but still they had not yet split into different schools. It's not so much that there are such great internal disagreements within the Buddhist community that it had to split into two things. This had not yet happened. So when you talk about the Buddhist Sangha in society, people would see the Sangha as being a single community. And the lineage as well was something that had continued in a single lineage. So how is the lineage passed down? The lineage was passed from the Buddha to Mahakasyapa, and then from Mahakasyapa to Ananda. So that was the situation. Now, when you speak about this, Then we come to the question of the elders of the teachings. So next, I would like to speak about the elders of the teachers during the time of early Buddhism, to see what sort of a connection there was between the elders and that period. Now, during the Buddha Shakyamuni's lifetime, before he passed into parinirvana, the teacher, the completely perfect Buddha, was himself the undisputed and universally accepted leader of the Sangha and the Lord of the teachings. Now, during the latter part of the Buddha's life, when he was already getting rather old, in later times, he didn't really guide the society as directly as he had before. He was no longer able to do that. And so at that point, the main people who took the responsibility were Shariputra and Madhgalyayana. It's like they had the responsibility of guiding took on the responsibility of guiding the Sangha. Now, in terms of their qualities, in terms of their fame, we don't need to speak about them. They're at a very high level. They're superior disciples. However, still, when they were guiding the Sangha, they did this in the form of the Buddha's students or in the form of the Buddhist disciples. But did they do this as like a leader of the Sangha? They did not. So basically, they're taking it as a given that they're still disciples of the Buddha and they're serving the Buddha and guiding the Sangha and administering the Sangha. Now, at this point, there was someone who kind of forced his way in, and who that one was Devadatta. We often talk about him as the demon Devadatta. And so this is like a and so, so here we're saying the demon Devadatta. It's not meaning like that he was actually like a demon in terms of gods and demons. It's actually saying that he's a bad person. It's not like he was a demon with horns on his head or anything like that. That's not how it was. Instead, Devadatta was actually a relative. He was the he was a half brother of the Buddha. So in this way, he was actually very close to the Buddha Shakyamuni. So Devadatta tried to work his way in, and he tried to take Shariputra's and Mahakasyap's place and to administer the Sangha and to guide the Sangha. And he said, I want to do this. And he did many things to try to achieve that sort of a status. And as he did them, when he told the Buddha what he said, what he wanted to do, then the Buddha reprimanded him severely. He castigated him severely. And because he was criticized so much, then, in the middle of such a large group of people, the Buddha had been reprimanded so standly that Devadatta got extremely angry. And he also got extremely jealous of the Buddha. And so what he did was he established a separate Sangha. He started his own separate Sangha. And so this created the charisma of the Sangha. This is what we call the schism of the wheel. Among the five heinous actions, one of them is the schism of the wheel. So it's taking the Sangha that had been unified and make it into two schisms, or into two sects. So this is what we call the schism of the wheel. In any case, he started a separate Sangha and he tried to lead it. And so it's like he was challenging the Buddha's position as the leader of the Sangha. Not only did he lead it, he said the Buddha and said he's getting old, he's going senile, he said. And said, so I'm going to take the responsibility, he said. And so he's made up many things and criticized the Buddha. And he also tried to uh, kill the Buddha. He set a crazed element on him. He threw large rocks on him. And and so he tried to kill the Buddha on a few occasions, but in actuality, but if in the actuality was he able to budge the Buddha from this position as being the king of Dharma? He was unable to do so. He couldn't at all. He wasn't able to become the actual leader, the ultimate leader of the Sangha. So in brief, the Buddha, was the founder of Buddhism, and he was also the teacher of the Dharma, and he was also the highest or supreme leader, the leader of the unrivaled teacher. And so this is basically undisputed and universally accepted among his disciples during the Buddha's lifetime. There was really no one other than the Buddha who could have this position. Now, the situation after the Buddha's parinirvana was that the leader of the Sangha after the Buddha's parinirvana, if you wonder, like, who was the leader of the Sangha, who was the substitute for the Buddha, then now within the Sangha, there was a custom of reaching consensus, choosing people by consensus or by votes. But the leader of the Sangha was not chosen by election. Instead, it was the leader appointed their successor and recognized him as being the leader. So in this way, the Buddha himself, before he passed away, appointed Mahakasyapa as the first elder of the teachings. And so one thing that needs to be mentioned here is that you're saying that entrusting the teachings to the next, to someone, then now what it says in some of the scriptures in the words of the Buddha is that there are two. There's entrusting the teachings to a human and entrusting the teachings to a God. And the reason for that is if you only trust the teachings to a person, then a person has actually an extremely short lifetime. And so for that reason, if they need to uphold and preserve and spread the teachings, and they're unable to make the teachings last for a long time. Now, if you give the teachings only to the gods, then the gods actually get very careless. They get distracted by sensory pleasures because it's so nice to be a god, and so it's harder for them to actually to take interest in whether the teachers are present or so forth. And so forth. Therefore, in order for such a fault not to happen, it is said that the Buddha entrusted the teachings to both humans and gods. Now, the main human whom he entrusted the teachings was Mahakasyapa. And when he entrusted the teachings to the gods, he entrusted them to the four kings of the four directions. So that's a little bit of a digression. But in any case, historically, the person to whom the Buddha entrusted the teachings was Mahakasyapa. And so he became like the first elder of the teachings, shall we say. He was the first one to whom the first one who was entrusted the teachings, so he became the first elder of the teachings. Then Mahakasyapa, before he passed away, appointed Ananda as the second elder. So Ananda is known as the second elder of the teachings. But however, when you speak about the elders of the teachings, sometimes somebody say that the elder, the teacher, then somebody say the teacher, the teachings. So there are two versions of the Tibetan. So either as elder, the teacher, or the elder, the teachings. And so there are two different versions. And in any case, for if you say the elder, the teachings, there are many different explanations of this. There are different opinions. Now, according to the histories of the Dipavamsa of the Sri Lankan history, the Mahavamsa, and the Vinaya commentary called the Samanta Basadika. This is it's a Theravada Vinaya commentary. So as I mentioned before, in the Pali village they have the aggregates or the Kataka. And so this is a commentary there. So it's like for us, it'd be like a commentary on the chapters of discipline. What this listed is listed five. The first was Upali. The second was Dasaka. The third was Sonaka. The fourth was Sigava. And the fifth was Mogaliputta. So these were recognized as the five elders of the teachings. So this is primarily the lineage of the Vinaya, because Upali was the greatest in terms of the Vinaya, so he was listed as the first elder of the teachings. Now, if you follow the Tibetan translation, the finer points of discipline, the first was Kashyapa, the second was Ananda, the third was Shanavasa, the fourth was Upagata, the fifth was Jidika, the sixth was Krishna, and the seventh was Mahashudarshana. So these are the seven elders of the teachings. Now in Chinese, there was a text translated during the Northern Wei dynasty, translated by Kivkara. Kivkara was a Sangha member from the northern parts of China. And he tried a text called the Lives of the Elders, or Fu Fa Cang Yin Wen Chuan. Now, what it says in this text is starting from Mahakasyapa, there were 21. There were over 21 elders of the teachings from Mahakasyapa through Bhikshu Singham. So this is according to the Lives of the Elders translated during the Northern Wei dynasty. And the last of these is the Bhikshu Singha. He was the 21st of the elders. And when we say this, and so the reason why the transmission of the elders is that there was an enemy of the teachings developed at that time. There is the northern Indian kingdom of Bactria, and its king was developed a strong aversion for Buddhism, and so he destroyed the Sangha, and he also killed the last elder of the teachings, the Bhikshu Singha. And so for this reason, the lineage of the elders of the teachings was broken. However, but modern scholars have some doubts of the lineage taught of the 21 elders taught in that text, the lives of the elders. So they doubt that this lineage is correct. And there are three main reasons. And the first reason is that as for the first 100 years plus a few decades after the Buddha's parinirvana, the Sangha was unified. The Sangha had not split into sections, it hadn't scattered. It was still unified. And so at that time, the elders of the teachings were like recognized as the leaders of the teachings as a whole. So before the split into the schools, then it's reasonable for there to have been a single leader of the teachings and the elder of the teachings. But after the teachings split into the schools, it's difficult for there to have been a single leader because each of the different schools would have its own important elder. And it would have been difficult for there to have been a teacher respected for them all. If there had been a single respected leader, then there wouldn't have been a situation of the teaching splitting into different schools. So after the schism, it would have been difficult for there to be a single leader school. So this is something to one understand. And the second reason is that these lives of the elders that were translated into Chinese, when it lists the elders, it includes two. It includes Loban or Master Ashvagosha. And so it lists Ashvagosha, and he listed before Nagarjuna. But, and then it lists Nagarjuna and so forth. And they say that it's not okay to do that because Nagarjuna and those others were Mahayana masters. And so it wouldn't be right to include them as like the elders of the teachings for all the different lineages of the Sangha. Now, the third reason they give is that this Chinese translation of the Lives of Elders gives one of the elders as Nima Gungpa as an elder. But they said it's not proper to list him because he was an important figure in spreading the Dharma to northwestern India. And he was also one of the important founders of the Sarvastivada lineage, but you can consider him that, but you should not consider him an elder of the teachings, they say. So these are the doubts about the elders of the teachings as listed in the Chinese translation of the Lives of Elders. Likewise, there's also the history of Buddhism in India by Taranaka. This is a very important Dharma text. And what it says here is that the people in Kashmir considered Nima Gungpa to be an elder of the teaching because the person who was most important in spreading the Dharma there was Nima Gungpa. So they considered him very important. So they consider him one of the elders of the teachings. So he's considered in the elders, and the reason why they say that he should be considered an elder is that Nima Gungpa sustained the teachings in central India for a time, and at that time Shanavasan only had a few teachings. And then for a little while after Shanavasan passed into Nirvana, the Nima Gungpa spread the teachings in central India, and he was called the eighth elder of the teachings. But what others say is that Nima Gungpa is the person who spread the Buddhism to Kashmir, and he was also prophesied by the Buddha. And as he was prophesied by the Buddha, then Ananda was also appointed him as such. Now, the main person that the main person the Buddha that Ananda entrusted the teaching was Shanavasan. So there are probably seven elders, not eight. This is probably a question from ancient times. Since Nima Gungpa was so important in Kashmir, the people in the area of Kashmir considered one of the elders of the teachings. When you speak about the term elders, each different region and each different school had people who, in their own historical tradition, they considered important and significant, and then they began to count them as elders of the teachings, it seems. In addition to that, there's also a text called the Blue Annals by Golodsawa Shunrapal. Now, what it says in the Blue Annals is that there's a commentary on the Travels to Lanka Sutra that lists the first 7 up through Didika as in the finer points of discipline. And then after that, it lists another 19 elders, beginning with Vibhaga. The last one of that, of this lineage of elders, is also Bhikshu Sangha. Now, it's a question, Now, we do need to investigate how similar this explanation from this commentary on the Travels to Lanka Sutra and the one on the Chinese Sutra has, Now, the Chinese says goes 21 elders, but the commentary on the Travels to Lanka, cited by Gulonzang, says that there are 19 elders. If you No, the question is 19 including Didiko or the 7 plus the 19. I haven't had a chance to investigate this, but in any case, but Gulozar says that in the Tenjir there are the two commentaries on the Travel of Sri Lanka and the present day Tenjir, but this is not that one. So it is probably a commentary on that sutra that is not included in the Tantra, according to Gulozar. So I can speak about the topic of the elders, the teachings in more detail later. I don't need to say more about them now. But in any case, what we mean in terms of a elder, the teachings is the word elders. When I say the elders, the teachings, if according to, as it's said in the Tarana's History of Demi, uh, uh, they, so as according to Taranata's History of India, the people who are able to hold the teachings as a whole, someone who's able to sustain the whole teachings, and someone who is able to have activity that is similar to the Buddhas. So the elders of the teachings didn't merely only have the authority as the leader of the Sangha. They also had to protect the Dharma and to spread the Dharma. They had to think about the teaching as a whole, their teachings of the teachings as a whole. And they also had to make sure that the teachings as a whole were preserved and then could be passed down to the next lineage. So being an elder of the teachings was not something easier. Now, we usually consider it as like a lineage when we talk about going from this lineage to another. It's not. So it's not just a lineage. The elder of the teachings also had their own particular features, their own nature, their own characteristics. And so they had to be superior in these ways. In any case, the elders of the teachings had a very strong influence on the development and the spread of early Indian Buddhism. And so the elders of the teachings were really a crucial aspect of early Buddhism. So next I'd like to speak about the first two of the elders of the teachings. These were Mahakasyapa and Ananda, right? And we speak about this, we talk about the stories of Mahakasyapa and Ananda. And I told a few stories about them in the previous year, so I don't need to say too much now. Today, what I'd like to speak about is the story of the time leading up to their parinirvanas, as well as what happened after their parinirvanas. So I thought I would speak a bit about both of those. And by giving an introduction to these, what this will, how this helps us is understanding the situation in the Sangha and society during the time, and we can understand their own situation at that time, then we can understand the situation of the Sangha and the society at that time. We can also understand the importance of Mahakasyapa and Ananda, as also how much you could understand what sort of a status these two held within the Buddhist and as well as the influence that they had on the Sangha. Now, the reason if we start talking about it in terms of their parinirvana, the reason why we need to speak about Mahakasyapa and Ananda's parinirvana here is that if we think about it, according to the Japanese scholar Takayoshi Namikawa, his opinion is that for Buddhists, whether they're a lama or a spiritual friend, if there's someone who's passing into nirvana or who is passing away, there's an actually very profound meaning to that. So death is something, their deaths are not something like ordinary people's deaths. Spiritual masters or great arhat, when they pass away, there's a really important meaning to that. Because when you think about the circumstance, the events around a person's passing away, we can see how significant that person who was passing away was to the Buddha's teaching, how much service they did to the teachings, and how much faith people had of them. For example, in the Buddha part of Nirvana, past and part of Nirvana, it said that he could consider the ultimate nirvana. We speak about there being nirvana with remainder, nirvana without remainder. So the Buddha's passing away was passing away, achieving arhatship without review. It's like recognized as being the ultimate realization, another manifestation uh, of the another realization of awakening. For example, we think about the name of the Pali text, the sutra that made the complete parinirvana. Just by looking at the title of the sutra, we can see that uh, we can understand that the Buddha's passing away was a demonstration of his ultimate realization or of his achieving the unexcelled realization. Moreover, when we speak about the Buddha's parinirvana, another thing that is included within that is, as we talk about the manner in which the Buddha passed away, and after he passed away, how he left relics and how he left his remains behind, and how many relics happened, and how people made offerings to their relics. And so this also is all contained within discussion of the Buddha's parinirvana. And so if we investigate this, then we can understand better how highly people considered the Buddha and the Sangha, how much faith they had, and how much confidence they had. Similarly, when the Buddha's great disciples, such as Mahakasyapa or Ananda, passed into nirvana, it shows how much the Buddha's teachings as a whole, or how much influence they had on Buddhist teachings and on the Sangha. And so what sort of a status and what sort of consideration they had in the Sangha. So for that reason, we should think about the story of the parinirvanas of Mahakasyapa and Ananda, and the feelings that people had when they passed away, as well as their opinions, as well as think about what sort of how people considered them and how people respected them. So this is the next area that we need to think about. So I think, so first of all, I think probably today we can probably only speak about Mahakashyapa's parinirvana. I think we don't have quite everything ready to speak about Ananda's discipline. So we will speak about Mahakashyapa's parinirvana. But first, we'll take the 30-minute intermission, and then after that, we'll speak about Mahakasyapa.
Tá, Shamlia. Ne diyorsun çembek? 다登记说的钱吧啦。
Next, to continue with the story of Mahakasyapa.
다들屯세를 직 숨,屯세, 자회사屯세 숨지.
Now, there are three main parts to this and then a summary to it. So 4 points here. Now, the first of these is before Mahakasyapa's party Nirvana, how he made offerings to the Buddha's relics. So this first point is speaking about how before Mahakasyapa passed into parinirvana, he made offerings to the relics of the Buddha. So this is the story. And the source for this is the chapters on the finer points of discipline of the Mula Sarvastivada tradition. This is in Tibetan and it's also in Chinese. So the Tibetan was translated by Yeshe De, and the Chinese was translated by Master Yi Jing or Master Paramata. Now, what it says here is that one day Mahakasyapa approached the Venerable Ananda and said, and he spoke with Ananda, and he said, Ananda, do you know when the Buddha entrusted the teachings to me, and then he passed into parinirvana. And so now I've also come to the time to pass into parinirvana. So you need to uphold these teachings in their full. And then what Mahakasyapa continued to say is that after I've passed into parinirvana in Rajagriha, there's Rajagriha, right? And this is like the capital of Magadha, the old capital of Magadha. You could say the child of a merchant. So that merchant or captain, the meaning is a merchant. They'll have a son. And when the child is born, they'll be swaddled in hempen fabric. So hemp is like a type of grass, and so they'd be called the hempen fabric. So because he'll be covered in or covered with hempen fabric, for this reason, his name will be called. He'll be called by the name of Shanavasin. Now he hasn't been born yet, but he will be born. This is a prediction. So this sort of a child will be born to a merchant, and when the child grows up, he'll cross the great ocean. And having crossed the ocean, he will he'll buy and bring them back here. And then when he comes back, he'll hold a 5-year-old, you could say, festival or something. It's basically a time when he makes an offering to the entire Sangha. And so for 5 years, he will make offerings to all the members of the Sangha. After that, he will go forth. And so in the future, he's the one who should transmit the teachings to. So this is the indicating who in the future, who the teachings should be entrusted to. And following this, what Mahakasyapa thought was, the compassionate teacher, the Bhagavan Buddha, has had great compassion. He had, because he had this great compassion, he underwent many hardships. He was my spiritual friend, and he was adorned with many qualities. And this means that he had infinite numbers of qualities. So I should make offerings to, you could say, either his relics or his remains, wherever those are. I would like to make offerings, and after that, I will go to pass into Nirvana. So before he was going to pass into Nirvana, he wanted to go to make offerings to the relics of the Buddha. Wherever the relics were, he wanted to make offerings to all of them. And then after he'd make offerings to all of them, he thought that he would pass into Nirvana and depart in Nirvana. And so he went to all the places where there were relics of the Buddha's body. And so he was old. And so it's difficult for him to go because he was old. So he went by miraculous powers. And so he went, and by the power of his miracles, he went to the great stupas. So this means the four sacred sites. Now, this is not clear in the Tibetan translation of the finer points of discipline, but it is very clear in the Chinese, where it says that he went to the place of the Buddha, the birthplace, the place of his awakening, the place of his turning the wheel of Dharma, the place of his passing away. So there were these four stupas at these four places. And so he went to these four places and he made offerings to them. And then there were also other stupas that had relics of the Buddha. Now, in the Tibetan ISKCON, it says the eight stupas. We often talk about the set of eight stupas. So it says the eight stupas. In the Chinese, it says the other stupas with relics. It doesn't say the eight. In any case, he went and made offerings to the relics of the Buddha. Then after that, he had made offerings to uh, all of the relics and of the Buddha that were kept in the human lands, and so, but he wasn't satisfied with that. So he also went to the land of the Buddhas, and there was a tooth of the Buddha. Because there was a tooth of the Buddha in the land of the Nagas, he went there to make offerings to it. And so he also went to the land of the Nagas. And then after that, he levitated up into the sky and went to the heaven of the 33 to see the Buddha's tooth. When Mahakasyapa arrived in the heaven of the 33, saw Mahakasyapa come, the gods Shakta and Brahma and all the other gods see him come, and they said they were very happy about this and said, "Why have you come? Well, what is it you'd like to do? Please let us know. Please tell us." And at that point, what Mahakasyapa said was Kaushika. So Kaushika is another word of chakra. So Kaushika. I've come to make an offerings to the tooth and other relics of the Bhagavan, and this is my final chance to make an offering. And so there must have been some tooth of the Buddha and some other relics in the land of the gods and the heaven 30th. And so when the Lord of Gods, Shakra, and all the other gods heard the Mahakasyapa say the word final, because he said I was making a final offering, then they got a little bit unhappy. They kind of wondered, what is the reason why they're unhappy about this? And so, and they weren't sure what they should do. And they didn't have anything to say. So then after that, these gods, the gods took the Buddha's tooth out from where they never did, and they put it in Mahakasyapa's hand. And Mahakasyapa then held the tooth of the Buddha's hand and then looked at it without blinking. Normally we blink, right? It's like he didn't even blink at all. He looked very carefully with it, and he looked, and then he placed it on the top of his head, and then he made offerings of Mandarava flowers. So these are the flowers of the heavens, like there's the Mandarava flowers of the heavens, as well as sandalwood powder and so forth, and made offerings. And then he taught the Dharma concisely to to the to Chakram when he got to. So he taught a little bit of Dharma. And then finally he said the 33 is on the summit of Mount Mara, right? He disappeared from there. He disappeared from there and went to Rajagriha. So this is the account of how Mahakasyapa made offerings to the relics of the Buddha, according to the account in the finer points of discipline. Now, in Chinese, there's also Sutra of the King Ashoka. This was translated by the President Alpha Qin of the Western Jin dynasty. I'm not sure if it's Alpha Qin or Jin. Anyways, Alpha Qin translated this. And then Drupal Kyabgon Rinpoche has translated it into Tibetan. So Drupal Kyabgon Rinpoche translated this. And if you wish to look at it, I'm sure you can find it. In any case, what it says in this Sutra of the King Ashoka it's basically the same as in the finer points of discipline, about how before he wanted to pass away, he wanted to make offerings. And so the content is basically the same, but what's a little bit different is that Kashyapa, what he thought to himself one day was the Tathagata, the Buddha Bhagavan, is my spiritual friend, like he's my guru. He's saying he's my spiritual friend. And so I need to repay his kindness, right? I need to show my gratitude and repay his kindness. So what I need to do is I need to fulfill whatever wishes the Buddha had. There's no better way to repay his kindness than to fill whatever wishes in his hands. But I have done whatever the Buddha wished me to do. Likewise, with the aid of my chaste conduct, I have benefited many beings through the Dharma. And also, for the sake of future beings, I've also made sure that the stream of Dharma, the lineage of Dharma, that the stream of Dharma has not been broken. Likewise, there are some people who, in the Sangha, who have expelled other Sangha members who had no conscience of propriety. And then for those who have a conscience and propriety, I've helped them remain in happiness. And so I've done everything that I can do, that I could to repay his conscience. And so now I am also old. And my body is grown old. And it's now becoming kind of decrepit and not so attractive. So I also am weary of it and will pass into Nirvana. And so then Mahakasyapa entrusted the teachings to Ananda. So this is what he thought when he before he entrusted the teachings to Ananda. And this is not in the finer points of discipline. And so after thinking this, he said to Ngawa, he said, I've given you, the Buddha entrusted me the treasury of Dharma, and so now I have the wish to pass into Nirvana. So this is the feeling I have. So I will entrust the teachings to you, so you should protect them well, he said. And just as he said, and Ananda said, I shall do as you say. And then the subsequent parts of the description are the same as before. Now it says that Mahakasyapa went to the heaven of the 33. First, he made offerings to the relics in the human realms, and then he went to the Nagalands, and he also made an offering to the tooth of the Buddha that was kept there. And then he went to the heaven of the 33. And what was in the heaven of the 33? There's the Buddha's tooth. And likewise, there was a hair of the Buddha's. And like also, there was, and so before when he distributed, in the first of his deeds, the book 12 deeds, is descending as a child of the gods who descended. So he had, as a child of God, he had the crown from that. And then there was also an alms bowl of the Buddha and some other things. So it's just a little different than the finer points of the discipline, because in the finer points of discipline, it just says the tooth and some other relics, and it does not specify them. So following that, the second point is Mahakasyapa's meeting with going to meet Ajatashatru and then passing into parinirvana. So when Mahakasyapa was preparing to pass into nirvana, another thing he thought was that I've come to the time when I'm going to pass into nirvana. It's time for me to pass away. So there's the king of Ajatashatru, and I need to send him a message about this. And so he went to King Pura, the king's palace in Rajagriha. And so in Rajagriha, there was a gatekeeper, right? There was a guard, right? So first you have the guard. And he said to the guard, you, oh man, just go and inform Ajatashatru that Mahakasyapa is waiting at the door and would like to see the king. So please go tell the king this. So then the gatekeeper, he sent the gatekeeper to see the king. The gatekeeper went inside, and when he got to the king, what didn't work out is the king was asleep. It's probably in the middle of the day. In India, it's day, so in India it's very hot. So after lunch, we often sleep for an hour or two, and so it's probably the king had probably had his midday meal and fallen asleep, right? So the king was asleep, and so the gatekeeper came back and said, came to Mahakasyapa and said, "A noble one," he said. The king is sleeping. And so he said, the king, they actually called him the Devi or the Deva or the god. So the king, but they mean the king. So the king is sleeping. And then the governor said, you should go wake him up. You go wake the king up. But the guard said, noble one, the king you can't wake the king up. The king is really cruel. He's very easily angered. He's very wrathful. If I go and wake up, then he's going to punish me harshly. So please don't make me go wake him up. And so Mahakasyapa had no choice, and so he said then, whenever the king wakes up, then at that time, tell him the Mahakasyapa came to see him and said that he is going to go pass into nirvana. And so please inform the king of this. So basically, give him that message. And then Mahakasyapa left. So he left Rajagriha, and when he left, where did he go? He went to the south, to the Kukutpada mountain. The Kukutpada mountain, which is south of Rajagriha. So there's this mountain, the Kukutpada mountain. So these days we call it, it's called in Tibetan Ryo Chakhang. So we went to see this, and then the top of the top is like there's like three big rocks at the summit, and Mahakasyapa spread some hay in the middle of the three peaks, and he thought to himself, In the past, the Bhagavan had a robe made of rags. So these are rags that pieces of fabric that other people had, old pieces of fabric that were useless that had just thrown in the trash. The Bhagavan had taken these and made a robe that he wore. So this is called a robe made of rags. There is a robe made of rags that the Bhagavan had made of rags that then the Bhagavan had given to Mahakasyapa. And so Mahakasyapa was wearing this, so I'm gonna wear this. And so I'm going to bless it so that my body remains until the teachings of Maitreya spread. Make it so that this body of mine stays without deteriorating. And in the future, when Maitreya comes, then at that time, Maitreya will show my body to his disciples so that they feel weariness of the world. By showing his body Kashyap's bodies to his students, Maitreya will instill his students with weariness for the world. And so, with this great intention, he um, uh, entered the samadhi. And so, when he's entered samadhi, then the three peaks kind of join together, and then Kashyapa was in like the chamber in the middle of the three cups, and within that is where his body was in there. So that was his plan. Nobody thought that he should do that. Then Kashyapa had another thought, and he said, "Oh, when King Ajatashatru, I couldn't actually see him, so definitely when he hears that I've been passed, he's definitely going to come here. And so when he comes, if he sees my remains, if he doesn't see my remains when he comes here, then the king Ajatashatru will become just too depressed and too sad, and he'll vomit hot blood and die. So in any case, if he made it so that if King Ajatashatru came, then it could be open, but otherwise he said it couldn't. And then the mountain was closed like that. So he stayed in this within this chamber inside the closed mountain. And so for him to pass away is not like us when you get sick and then pass away. It's like first it's different. It's at first he entered. He did it intentionally. He entered meditation. Then he gave up relinquished his life, and then passed away. And so when Mahakasyapa thought to himself that he was going to pass away and he was relinquishing life, then at that time, then there are many different happens now in the Chinese translation. What it says is that the earth shook in 6 different ways. Like there were earthquakes. The earth shook in 6 ways. And it describes the ways that it shook. But in any case, the earth shook. And then stars with long tails of smoke fell and then started fires in all directions. And then the gods beat drums in the sky and so forth. So these are all the different signs and omens that occurred. And anyways, and in the end, Mahakasyapa himself, when he's going to pass away when he's planning to pass away before he did, then there was this custom of showing miracles before he passed away. So he entered the samadhi, then he levitated into the sky, and his body levitated in the sky and showed many various miracles. It's like sometimes he poured water from his body, and sometimes there are appearances of fire from his body. Sometimes like there are the appearances of sheets of rain falling from great clouds. And so after displaying such great miracles, then his body came down into the chamber in the rock. And then he came down, he lay down on his right side and placed one leg on top of the other. The same as with the posture of the Buddha when he passed away. lying on his right side with one leg in the other. So lying down. And then he entered Nirvana in the expanse of Nirvana without remainder. In brief, he passed away. And so once he'd passed away, then, and there were so many different signs and opens, and Shakra and Brahma and the other gods also saw that the earth was quaking. And they think, why is the earth quaking? Why are we having earthquakes today? And when they tried to figure it out, then they realized that Venerable Mahakasyapa had passed away, and this was connected to that. And so then immediately Shakra and Brahman and the many hundreds and thousands of gods tossed Utpal and lotus and white lotus flowers as well as powder, sandalwood, and agura, and they came to where Kashyapa's remains were, and they sprinkled his flowers body with flowers and sprinkled it with a powder. So I think that when they arrived, it must have been opened. It had not yet closed yet. It was going to clean. And so they sprinkled it with all the flowers. They tossed all the powders and so forth, and then they left. And when they left, then the three peaks closed. Now, when we're ordinary people, you can't go. You can't see anything. Now, at that time, the gods, because because they're bereft of Kashyapa, they really grieved. They felt terribly. They grieved terribly in their minds. And what they said is that it hadn't been a very long time since the Buddha passed away, and now the Mahakasyapa has also passed away. Likewise, the kings who used to live in the cave of the banyan tree are no more than names, and all their virtuous qualities. So it says quite a bit about this. Likewise, it says that the realm of the kingdom of Magadha has become emptied. It's like there's nothing left there. And likewise, there's no longer a protector loving to benefit those who are hungry and desperate and defenseless. And so all people are now no longer have any field of merit where they can accumulate merit, so they have destroyed virtue. So now two Bhagavans have passed into Nirvana. Now the peak of the mountain of true Dharma has fallen. And so like the ship of true Dharma has been rocked and the Dharma has been scattered, and now the light of true Dharma has gone out. The ocean of true Dharma is turbulent, and the teacher who benefited everyone has disappeared. Everything has changed, they said, and they lamented and wailed, and they prostrated, and then they disappeared and went back to their own places. So this is the manner in which the elder Mahakasyapa passed away. Now, what it says in the Sutra from Ashoka, what's a little bit different is that after Mahakasyapa entrusted the teachings to Ananda since Mahakasyapa had said, I'm going to pass away into Nirvana, so I'm entrusting the teachings to you. So Ananda started to suspect, when is he going to pass away? He's wondering, is he going to pass away? He's thinking, I'm not going to see him again. So he had this doubt. And so every day he'd go go follow Kashyapa. He just would never leave Kashyapa. He just always went along with Mahakasyapa. They were going along. Then one day Mahakasyapa said to Ananda, you go off to Rajagriha alone for alms. I'm also going to Rajagriha for something. But he said, but he didn't let Ananda stay with him. He sent him off separately. Otherwise, Ananda is always following and going wherever Mahakasyapa did. This probably would have interfered with Mahakasyapa passing into Nirvana. In any case, Ananda put on his robes in the morning, and then with the Dharma robes and alms bowl, he went into Rajagriha for alms, and Kashyapa himself also went into Rajagriha for alms. And then while he was went into the Rajagriha for alms, what Mahakasyapa thought isn't that what is different than in the 5 points. The difference is he said, in the past, Ajahata had said to me, inform me when you'll pass into Nirvana. Please tell me before you pass into parinirvana. So Ajatashattra said this. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pass into Nirvana. So today I need to go to see King Ajatashattra. And so is this. So this is the reason why he went to see King Ajatashattra. And so this is another particularity. Then finally, after it passed into Nirvana, the gods said that it's a little bit different in terms of when the reason why it said the gods who had passed the gods who lived in the cave, the banyan tree, it said the reason why it said this is that there's well, the way I think about this is that there's Mahakasyapa was born in a big Brahmin family, and they couldn't have the family was unable to have a child, and so they went to there was a particular banyan tree, it was a huge tree. And so they'd go to that huge banyan tree and they believed that there was a god who dwelled there. And so they went and made offerings to him. They always went to make offerings to the god. And then eventually they were hoping to have a son someday. Then later, the elder Mahakasyapa was born. So when you think about the god of the cave of the banyan tree, this is probably referring to the tree god of the banyan tree where his parents had prayed before he was born. So when the dates of the cave of the banyan tree and so forth also lamented that the Dharma has disappeared and so forth. And following this is the third point, is that after Mahakashyapa's parinirvana, Ananda and King Ajatashattu went to pay respects to his remains. And so what this is saying is that Mahakashyapa had passed away, and then Ananda and King Ajatashattu went to go see his remains. And so what it says in the Mulasarvastavada Finer Points of Discipline is that so King Ajatashattu had been sleeping. So when Mahakasyapa came, Ajatashattu had been sleeping, but in this he had a dream that wasn't so good. It was actually a bad dream. And we had this dream that the line of the uncles of the royal lineage had been broken. The Shangpas. So this is his own uncles. This is his maternal lineage. The uncles in his maternal lineage, they dreamt that lineage was going to be broken. Now, the Chinese translation says a little bit different. It said he dreamt that there are the pillars and the beams, and one of the beams would break. And when he dreamt that the beams, it was a very scary dream, and so he immediately woke up in a fright. At the same time as he woke up, then the gatekeeper said that, oh, the Venerable Elder Mahakasyapa came and saw me, and he says he will pass into parinirvana, he said. And so he informed the king of this, and when he was informed, the king fainted on the floor, unconscious. The king immediately fainted unconscious, and when he fainted, then immediately his attendants sprinkled him with water and revived him. And then immediately he went off to the bamboo grove. In Rajagriha, there is the bamboo grove, right? It's a place where there are many bamboos. And so this monastery in there is called the Bamboo Grove. It's like and when he went there and he saw Ananda, and then he prostrated his entire body at Ananda's feet, and he wept. And so today I heard that Mahakasyapa is going to pass into Nirvana. And so he was really really grieved this, and so there's nothing for Ananda to do. So Ananda immediately took King Ajatashatru, and they went to that mountain where he passed away, Kuklapada or Kudapada. Now I've been to this mountain. I think a few of you also have been. It's really difficult to go up. They've made a few staircases, but it's a bit of a climb. It's not that easy. Likewise, the road to go there is not all that good. No, so they said that there used to be a lot of bandits and thieves on this. When I go, there are always a lot of police and bodyguards. And when I went there, they sent extra police along there because of this well known that there are a lot of uh, bandits in that region and gangsters in that region. In any case, uh, but anyways, going up there is very difficult. And anyways, Ananda and Ajatashatru went and they climbed this Kukutapada mountain. And when you get to the top of our ordinary, we went. We looked at. And so we just see there's a mountain, but we can't see Mahakasyapa's body because it's within the chamber in the top of the mountain. It's not inside, right? So when Ajatashatru came there, then because Mahakasyapa had that idea, I was thinking Mahakasyapa is going to come. If he comes, then if he's not able to see it, then he's going to vomit blood and die. So because Mahakasyapa thought that as soon as Ajatashatru came, then the great yakshas, the huge yakshas, opened up the mountain, and inside was Mahakasyapa's body. And he saw that all the gods had offered the mandara flowers and all the sandalwood powder. And so Ajatashatru came to see the remains of Kashyapa. So it had been covered with the mandara flowers and the sandalwood powder. And when he saw this, he immediately raised his arms and he prostrated like a tree that's been cut down from its base. So when he prostrated after that, then he immediately thought that they had to do the cremation. And he started to prepare wood for a cremation so he started to prepare for a cremation. And at that point, Elder Ananda said, King, what are you doing? What are you planning to do? The king said, I'm going to cremate the elder Mahakasyapa's remains. So there is, of course, this tradition of cremating everyone's remains in India. But at that time, Ananda said, okay, you aren't supposed to do that. These remains have been blessed to remain until my teachings have appeared. So they've been blessed to remain without deteriorating or decomposing until then. And in the future, the Bodhisattva Maitreya will come to this place surrounded by 690 million disciples. And at that point, then Maitreya will hold this body and say to his disciples, this is the elder Mahakasyapa, the disciple of the Bhagavan Shakmuni, who became the greatest at having the few desires, being content and keeping the 12 qualities of training. And likewise, he was the one who first compiled the true Dharma of the Buddha Shakyamuni. He is the one who arranged this. So at this time, Maitreya will show this to his disciples. And when he gives that, then at that time when Maitreya comes, there's the discussion that Mahatreya will be a very large action. That's like these people have very large bodies, much taller than people of this day. And so for that reason, at that time, the people at that time will say, look at it. Someone that's small, who has such a small body, is so too. The people at that time are really tiny, they'll think. But certainly the Buddha Shakyamuni must have been much different than everyone else and must have been large. And when they think that, then Maitreya will take the outer robe from the body and hold it, as he held it and showed it up to, and he showed, this is the outer robe of the Bhagavan Shakyamuni, and hold it up and show them. When I show them, and they'll just be so amazed by seeing this. Even the Buddha Bhagavan was not all that big, was he? They'd be so surprised, and because of that, then all the 690 million bhikkhus will promise to practice the qualities of trainings, and because they practice them, then they will in the future achieve the state of arhatship. And so, for that reason, this is the reason why Mahakasyapa has blessed his body to remain without decomposing. And so, even if we tried to burn it, cremated, it wouldn't burn. So we must not burn it. However, but if we build a stupa on top of this, then we can do that. And so, as Ananda said, the king did as said, and he left out. And when he did, then as soon as the king had gone outside, then the mountains immediately closed back up. So it had opened up before, then it closed back down, closed again. And so Kashyapa's body was no longer visible. And following that, the king built a stupa on top of the mountain, and he made offerings there. So now we've built a new stupa there. So then King Ajatashatru prostrated Venerable Nada's feet and said, "Elder, when the Buddha passed into Parinirvana, I didn't see him. When Elder Mahakasyapa passed into I didn't see him. So when you pass into Parinirvana, please make sure that I can see you too." And so then Ananda said, okay, I'll make that. He accepted, he promised that he'll do it. So that's how it was. So this is the account in the finer points of discipline of the Masvastivada tradition. And the Sutra of the King Ashoka is essentially the same, so we don't need to say any more about that. So next, what I'd like to say is the conclusion to the story of Mahakasyapa's parinirvana. So we've come to the point where we need to conclude this. So for this summary, among the texts of the Northern Buddhist tradition, that means the Northern Buddhist tradition basically primarily means the Chinese texts. We mean the texts translated into Chinese. So we understand Northern Buddhist traditions, meaning the Chinese Buddhism. So within the Northern Buddhist scriptures, there are descriptions of the story of the Mahakasyapa's parinirvana and the life story of King Ashoka, the sutra compiling the Buddha's deeds, likewise as in the Mula Sarvastivada finer points of discipline, and also in the great controversy on the 100,000 Prajnaparamita by Nagarjuna. So they all describe this. However, there is probably not much of a description of Mahakasyapa's parinirvana in the Pali scriptures. And so what is this? So why is it that there's nothing about Mahakasyapa's parinirvana in the Pali scriptures? There's a Japanese scholar, Takeyoshi Namikawa, and what he says is that, in his opinion, the account of Mahakasyapa's parinirvana was not considered as important as the story of Ananda's, and so therefore it's not mentioned in the other treatises and commentaries, and so for this reason it's not explained in the Pali tradition. So that's his hypothesis. In any case, all the quotes that are given the main were basically based on the basis is the Mula Sarvastivada minor points of discipline and the life of King Ashoka. And the content or the description in those two is slightly different than the accounts in the Sutra of Compiling the Buddhist Deeds, the Great Commentary on the 100,000 Lines of Paramita, and the Great Congress of the Western religions, that is Tang Xuanzang's records of his travels. So it's a little bit different than there. What it says in the Great Commentary on the 100,000, the Paramita on 100,000 lines, to give you an example. Now, this is a text we don't have in Tibetan. This commentary on the Great Commentary on the 100,000 Paramita is about what we call the boom, or the 100,000. We have the 12 commentaries, the 12-volume Paramita. So this is the commentary on this. And it said that the author of this is Nagarjuna. This is only in Chinese. It's not in Tibetan. It's probably not in any other language than Chinese. So what it says here is that the Bodhisattva Maitreya, will lead a large ensemble to Vulture Peak Mountain. Now here it says Vulture Peak Mountain. And Maitreya, the Bodhisattva Maitreya, with his toes, will open up the peak of the mountain. And when he opens the mountain with the toes, there inside is Mahakasyapa's body. This is actually kind of scary to think about it, if you think about it. The Bodhisattvas, or the region Maitreya's, will open up this, and then within that there's Mahakasyapa's remains. The remains will get up, carrying get up, carrying with his running stuff in his armful, and come out and sit with it. So this time, it's kind of scary to say, but Maitreya will say to his followers, the past Buddha Shakyamuni appeared in a time when humans could live to 100 years. At that time, this Mahakasyapa was the greatest in having few desires, being content and remaining within the qualities of training. He achieved the 6 clairvoyances and 3 awarenesses. He was always compassionate toward sentient beings and brought them benefit and happiness. And so when he passed into parinirvana by the power of miracles, so he was speaking about the future. He was speaking of the future, talking about when the Bodhisattva Maitreya comes. So he, by his Metaxpa, he made his bodily remains to last until now, so this is talking about the future. And so he did this by the power of his miracles. Even though his body is really tiny, it's like I said before, at the time people have a very huge body size, because this was a tiny body as that. He was able to do such great benefit with a body like this, right? So look at you. You have huge bodies, and you were really born in a really good time. And the Buddha, the Buddha Shakyamuni appeared in a time of conflict. The time of Maitreya is supposed to be a good time. And so at that time, you're born in a good time. So why aren't you accomplishing benefit for yourselves, he'll say. And then at that time, because of Maitreya, then Maitreya will teach the true Dharma and liberate innumerable sentient beings from the extreme of suffering. Now, the reason why this is cited in the commentary in the 100,000 line project is that it's primarily teaching that the Bodhisattva Maitreya will also teach Dharma at Prajnaparamita, and this Dharma will also be the transcendent Prajnaparamita. So this is why this is showing that the Prajnaparamita was taught by the Buddhas of the past, will be taught by the present and future. And so for this reason, everyone should have faith in the Prajnaparamita and should celebrate Prajnaparamita. So now the general account in the general commentary on the 100,000 is separate. Now it doesn't say anything about the actual parinirvana, but it does say that the remains will be there and that they will have not deteriorated. But the point that's different is that in the great commentary, it says that Mahakasyapa's remains are at Vulture Peak Mountain. But all the other accounts say that it is at the Kukutapada Mountain. There's no question of it being at the Vulture Peak Mountain. The Vulture Peak Mountain is a place where he taught the Dharma many times. And in particular, it is the place where he taught the sutras on Prajnaparamita. It is also the place where Devadatta had cast a stone. The Buddha was going on balloon. So he was on the top. He threw us from the rock, and he almost killed the Buddha. And so the place where he almost killed the Buddha was in the region of the area of Vulture Peak Mountain. And so I think that it's most likely that it's more appropriate to consider Kukutapada as the location of Mahakasyapa's parinirvana. So in brief, to summarize, the person to whom the Buddha Shakyamuni entrusted his teachings was Mahakasyapa. And so since he knew he was going to pass away soon, he entrusted the teachings to Ananda, and then he went alone to the Kukutapada mountain and blessed his body so that it remain without deteriorating until the time of Maitreya. So whether you say he's and so he entered samadhi and passed away. And in the future, when Maitreya comes to the world, he will show Mahakasyapa's remains to all supreme beings, saying, "This is a great disciple of the Buddha Shakyamuni of Shakyamuni. This is Mahakasyapa." And because of showing this to them, then many of them will develop diligence and world weariness, and because it'll be benefit in this way, and because of this, they will achieve the noble results. This is what it said. And in the end, they said that there will be a stupa built on the top of the mountain. When Tang Shun San, he said that there was a stupa on the top of the mountain. And the ability to identify Kukutapada and to determine that it's the place of Mahakasyapa's parinirvana is because of the writings of Tantra San. So that is enough for this for today. Oh, there's one more thing I need to say. We will need to change our schedule a little bit. And the way we need to change it is that we are supposed to have a teaching the day after tomorrow, but I will be unable to give a teaching the other day. I will be busy that day. So we need to change our times, change our dates a little bit. And so as we change the times, then actually today is the 7th of August. So on the 8th, we have a day off. On the 9th, we're supposed to have a day. And so we have a day off on both the 8th and the 9th. And we'll have a teaching on the 10th of August. So no teaching on the 9th, but we'll have a teaching on the 10th. So tomorrow and the next day will both be days off. Now, another thing I'd like to mention to you is that on the 19th of August, for one thing, is that it is according to the Tibetan calendar, the Putluk Tibetan calendar, the general expected calendar. This is the one, the Putluk calendar is the one that we use. And in the Putluk tradition, there are two sixth Tibetan months. And so this is the sixth Tibetan month. And so we discussed whether to hold it the celebration of the party Nirvana of Karmapa this later sixth Tibetan month. And we decided if we could hold it in the later month, we could all celebrate it together. So on the 15th, the full moon day of that, which is the 19th of August, we will have a celebration of the party Nirvana of Karmapa. And also, that is the day of the cremation of the precious Khenpo Rinpoche Tsultrim Gyatso. Also, my father, Karma Dundrup, passed away recently. And so for that reason, on the 16th, the cremation is on the 16th. As they've looked at all the calendars and so forth. Now, the place of the cremation is going to be in my homeland. So that's what they decided to hold it there. And so for that reason, for that day, there are many things that are all happening on that same day. So on that day, we have to have the Karmapa Parinirvana. What else we have to do, I need to think. So please keep that in mind.